Do you know what an LP record is?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
I do not.
I think so.
No.
LP record?
Yeah.
I don't think I do.
Yes.
Vinyl?
It sounds like something really old.
I know what a record, but I don't know LP. Does that mean that he's made of oil?
No.
Long play?
Thomas Alva Edison invented the phonograph in November 1877. While working with an instrument that transcribed telegrams, he began to notice that when the indented dots and dashes hit the steel spring he used to keep the tape in place during recording, it gave off a sound that Edison described as resembling human talk heard indistinctly. He then designed an instrument consisting of a metal cylinder, a diaphragm and needle unit for recording, and another similar unit for reproduction. The cylinder, wrapped in tinfoil and mounted on a screw, spun from left to right as the handle was turned, which caused the recording needle to indent the pattern of sound vibrations in a vertical hill and dale pattern in the groove. Many people saw the phonograph as having a crude design and dubious utility, and Edison himself later admitted that the tinfoil records were not very clear and did not last long. Alexander Graham Bell made his own advancements on the machine in 1880 when he set up a laboratory that would focus on research relating to sound and acoustics. His phonograph worked the same way as Edison's, but replaced the tinfoil-covered cylinder with one made of cardboard and coated in wax. This would work much the same as Edison's had, with the stylus engraving the sound waves onto the wax instead of the tinfoil. Although imperfect, this invention was clearly an improvement on Edison's original, as the use of the wax created a sharper and better defined recording and allowed closer grooving that had not been possible with tinfoil. Bell had also gotten rid of the hand crank found on Edison's machine and replaced it with an electric motor or foot treadle, which effectively got rid of the pitch fluctuations that were common with the hand crank method. Edison was angry at the efforts of Bell and converted his phonograph to one resembling Bell's. The main difference was that Edison's cylinders were made entirely of wax that could be shaped and used over and over again, while Bell's cylinders were cardboard coated in wax that had to be discarded more quickly. Emil Berliner began his work on improving the phonograph in 1883. He wanted to improve the phonograph by using a lateral zigzag system instead of the vertical hill and dale system previously used. He covered a disc of heavy plate glass with lampblack, then set it revolving on a turntable where the stylus created a spiral pattern on the disc. When hit by the sound waves, the stylus would vibrate laterally, leaving a visual tracing on the disc. After the sounds were recorded on the disc, Berliner fixed the tracing with varnish and had it photo engraved in metal. He called his invention the gramophone to distinguish its lateral cut discs from the phonograph, which used vertical cut cylinders. In the winter of 1887-1888, Berliner moved to using a thin fatty film to coat the zinc disc. In the mid-1890s, a lively contest between the gramophone and the phonograph began. Although they were used side by side, the wax cylinder phonograph remained more trusted and popular. By the early 1900s, Berliner's disc and similar hard wax creations had begun to gain popularity while the wax cylinder declined. In 1931, the Victor Company introduced the 78 RPM, which many other companies quickly adopted. With the absence of a long-playing record, most companies made do with packaging several 10 to 12-inch discs together and selling them as albums. One of the main problems of the 78 RPMs came from the undesirable noise that was a result of the disc slowly being worn away as the playback needle pushed down heavily on the record. The first successful LP record was developed by Columbia Records under the direction of Dr. Peter Goldmark. On Friday, June 21, 1948, Columbia Records called the press to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel to unveil their revolutionary new product. This new technology was a 12-inch microgroove disc that had a playing time of 23 minutes per side. The prototype held 224 to 300 grooves per inch and was pressed in a non-breakable plastic known as vinylite. Columbia also demonstrated the new record player that had a turntable that revolved at a steady 33 1/3 RPM. This slower speed made it extremely important to cut down on the noise of the turntable and to eliminate variations in turning speeds. The first LPs were not uniform and often had hard, wiry, or dull sound. Other problems ranged from sustained notes that tended to waver slightly to loud parts that sometimes made an untimely and faint appearance ahead of the beat, known as pre-echo. In spite of the many problems, an enthusiastic minority saw the future promise of LPs through the minimized problem of surface scratch, record wear, and the alleviated problem of storage. They also gave the benefits of hearing recorded performances without breaks in continuity, and they got more music per dollar than ever before. This minority grew into the majority as sound quality improved.
Just a record that has music on it and you play it on a record player.
It's like a giant sort of 12 or 13-inch diameter vinyl piece that has waves etched into it.
It's one of those old big vinyl records.
Right, it's distinguished. It's slow playing, so you can put an entire album on a single record, right?
There were many possible alternatives to the LP record at the time of its invention. However, many of these possible alternatives suffered from one drawback or another, which slowed their adoption into the mass consumer market. These drawbacks usually had to do with sound quality or ease of use. Many of these alternatives would later go on to become industry standards after the decline of the LP. These alternatives can be divided into two categories. The first category is magnetic tape recording. Magnetic tape recording involves using magnetized tape in order to record sound. Originally, metal wires were used, however these were later replaced with paper coated in iron oxide. This would later go on to become the industry standard that replaced the LP. However, at the time it was invented, magnetized tape simply was not able to live up to the standards set by vinyl records at the time. It was not until the late 1960s that technology for recording on magnetized tape had evolved to the point at which it could compete with the LP record for dominance of the industry. Reel-to-reel recording, which used big reels of tape to record music, was the first real form of magnetic tape recording to be developed. The system worked well from the standpoint of the recording industry because music could finally be edited through methods such as splicing. However, these machines were big, expensive, and hard to use. This limited reel-to-reel in the commercial market. The second major alternative was the 8-track tape. The 8-track was developed with the idea of simplifying the reel-to-reel. This was done by enclosing the entire system in a cartridge that could be put into a tape player. Of all the competitors to the LP, this one would become the most successful because it could be played in cars. However, it still suffered from many of the drawbacks of magnetic recording, such as poor sound quality. The final magnetic recording competitor was the cassette. The cassette would later go on to dominate the music industry. Cassettes had several advantages, such as their 30-minute playing time. However, they also suffered from sound quality issues. Cassettes would not outsell the LPs until the 1980s. The second category is other forms of vinyl record, the most notable of these being the 45 RPM, developed by RCA Victor. The 45 RPM could really only hold single songs. This meant that it did not present a major threat to the LP in terms of album sales. However, it did make a significant mark on the single market. Your first or fondest memory of the LP record?
I thought long and hard about that question and tried to remember, if I could, what was the first one I ever purchased. And I don't know that I have that answer, but I do remember this. Driving down the road in my small town in New Jersey, and I heard for the first time a song by Hall & Oates. And I stopped the car and went into my local record store and bought an album called Abandoned Luncheonette. It was their second album they ever made, and I've been a fan of theirs ever since. So, and I still play that album to this day. I have it on disc now, obviously, but that's the best I can do for you on that question.
I did get a portable record player at a garage sale for like $5 when I was a little kid, and the speakers kind of clamped onto it, and you could unfold them off and set them, and they had fake wood grain and this absolutely hideous kind of mustard colored fabric over them, and I only had two records. I had Cyndi Lauper and Phil Collins, I think, were the only records that I had from the same yard sale, potentially.
What kind of impact do you think LP records have had on the music industry or the way that we listen to music today?
Well, you know, I don't know that I have this good of an ear, but what I understand is that the quality of a vinyl LP is better than this compact disc that we're all listening to.
It's the origins of the way we think about the album, which I think is really interesting, because the album as a unit of recorded music is really being broken up nowadays by iTunes and buying songs one at a time. And I think people don't tend to think of, you know, albums of music as much, right? But kind of from the LP through the CD, right? There's this idea that songs, there's a natural unit of 10 or 12 songs that constituted an album, and something that you could, and something that's always been very interesting to me as a music consumer is the way in which you can think about those songs then as a cohesive whole, the way they work together, the order you put them in, the kind of emotional arc of that 45 minutes or an hour's worth of listening, which, I think is a product of the LP record. Right, and something that's really going away now, right? That people tend to consume songs one at a time, right? And don't think albums aren't really cohesive wholes as much anymore.